Sir William CO.
The Minister Morris Williamson is perhaps the only minister that I have known in the past 3, going on 4 years that has consistently brought good news to this House in his portfolio as the Minister of Customs. And unlike my colleague Trevor Mallard, I'm not going to be making the allegations he made about why, but simply to note that we all generally agree about the importance of protecting our borders, and the work that he is now the beneficiary of credit is work that goes back a ways to the time of Minister Rick Barker, to the time of Minister Nanaia Mahuta. So I just want to lay that on the table for people to note. The Minister will also know that when he first introduced this bill, there were some serious concerns despite our general agreement around it. The first point was around the sharing of information, privacy. Now, that still remains a concern for me, despite the fact that we now have the Privacy Commissioner being able to review the goings-on in 5 years' time. I suppose the question that still remains doubtful in my mind is the period from start to the 5 years. What happens when information is inadvertently shared with those companies or those that we do not want to have this information available to? What systems are in place is my question, in terms of how do we ensure that that information is safeguarded for the purposes that we seek to have that information available for. So I wouldn't mind the Minister being able to sort of allay those concerns, because I think those were concerns shared by many in the committee that deliberated on this particular issue. And also, I suppose to expand a little bit on that, I'll tell you a story that took place last month. I had an aunt who passed away in Melbourne. Just as my younger brother arrived here using the gateway system, we then had to have him go back with us, back to Melbourne. And on arriving in Melbourne, I was able to use the gateway system. My brother attempted to use the gateway system in Australia, but he could not go through. Anyway, I went through thinking that would be a matter of minutes and I'd see him again. We arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning. I did not see my brother for another 3, going on 4 hours. And what had happened was apparently his passport did not screen with the gateway system on the other side. For whatever reasons, he was told that the machine did not pick up the number from the passport. And so for the 3, almost 4 hours, he was questioned by the authorities there. There was no other information available to them to be able to determine whether this passport was legitimate. In fact, they made the allegation that perhaps this was a forged passport. And so the officials there had to call back to New Zealand. Well, this is the point in terms of what I said earlier about the sharing of information. This was very important information, wasn't available to the authorities there, and for some reason rather, it was considered that the information that the machinery should have had was in limbo, and therefore we were detained for that 4 hours. My brother was alleged to have been some sort of a bad person, and questions over whether that passport was legitimate or not. And so this wasn't his fault. This was the fault of the system. Okay, so we paid by waiting around for 4 hours or so. But I would hate to see the fears that were expressed by... Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair.
Sir William Sear.
I suppose the fears that were expressed by some in the industry and other officials was that what if this ends up in the wrong hands? What if this information ends up in the wrong hand? I think the example was shared by some that it could be sensitive business information that gets into the wrong hands. So that's one. The other issue that still is a matter of concern is the cost of the system that we're putting. I think there's been some rough estimates around 200, maybe 400 million. Do we now have a correct figure? Wouldn't mind the Minister being able to share that with the rest of us. I guess the other concern also that we've now added the instant fines, added other costs to the importers. The fear is that those will simply be passed on to consumers. Is that the reality for us? Do we expect the increases in cost of consumer items as a result in the change in cost regime? I mean, I think most people here in this House agree that, if we're going to create jobs, we've got to try and encourage and support business. One of the reasons why Labour has always supported the reduction in compliance costs for business, but it seems like we're now going the other way by adding what some might say unnecessary costs to importers, and the threat by those importers that those costs will simply be passed on to the consumers. So wouldn't mind for the Minister to make some comments around those. Generally, Mr. Chair, the rest of the amendments were minor. I don't know whether the Minister's answered Trevor Mallard's questions around the dog. Did we ever find out what the difference is? The other point I'd also make, in terms of secure customs area and giving the powers to officials to use reasonable force, have we determined what reasonable force is? The concern is there that we're only humans, officials are only humans. How do we prevent officials who are tired, who might be upset, from overdoing what may be reasonable force on unsuspected travellers who might, for no fault of their own, end up in a space that is considered to be customs space? I mean, I would have thought that to prevent that, you'd have some clear big signs to ensure that people do not trespass onto those particular areas. So those are really the concerns that I would share. I haven't been part of the select committee, so I don't know what updates have been made, and so I'm generally asking the Minister whether he wouldn't mind sharing if there are any changes to that. And my biggest concern I had with this particular system is, are we going to lose any jobs in front line? Will we lose jobs by combining the system for the collection and sharing of information? So that's really my contribution to what I don't consider to be very sexy legislation. I would have thought that this was a time for us to debate. This would have been a better time to debate some of the issues that were raised in the maiden speeches by the Green Party earlier today and by my colleagues late yesterday. Speeches around closing the gap on inequality would have been better, sir, than for us to be looking at border control, which is an issue that we all really agree that we need to look after. So I'll finish off there, sir, and hopeful that the Minister will take the time to respond to some of the questions that I have raised. Thank you.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy